Next, in a Clive James postcard from Paris.
Only when I'm in my bed at dawn, with the sole noise, the cars of Paris, my memory sometimes betrays me, and that summer returns with all its recollections. With my eyes closed, something wells up in me that I greet by name. Bonjour, Tristesse. Françoise Sagan was 17 years old when she wrote that, and she was here, a writer in Paris. I was at the other end of the world, dreaming about being a writer in Paris. I dreamed of left-bank cafe tables where I would sit writing my own sensationally precocious novel called Au revoir, Sydney. More than 25 years ago, when I first walked on this bridge, the Pont des Arts, that was how I saw myself, a Parisian, blending easily into my elegant surroundings. I don't blend easily into anything anymore, and I suppose I never did. But if I have a spiritual home, then Paris is it. My life would have been different if I had lived it here, but I suppose Paris would have been different too. Knowing it better, I might have loved it less. As things are, I can't take my eyes off the place. When I was young, Paris was my city of women, except I never met any. In the 60s, we struggling young Australian expatriate writers spent all day in the cafes of the Latin Quarter, but it cost so much that we couldn't afford a second day. So we all went off to be struggling young writers in London, where we got more done than we ever would have here, because in London there was nowhere to sit and watch the girls go by. Watching them go by, of course, was all we ever did. We had nothing to say to them except parlez-vous anglais in an Australian accent. And anyway, our throats were dry. Those creatures were just stunning, and they still are. Their poise is awe-inspiring, their chic, absolute, their general attitude inviting you unequivocally to drop dead. Once again, as if a quarter of a century had never been, I sat nailed to my chair, consumed by the sadness of the unattainable. Bonjour, Tristesse. Françoise Sagan, the most chic schoolgirl of them all, had become world famous with her first novel at an age when the girls I knew were buying their first panty girdles. When I got to Paris, she was at the top of the list of all the fashionable women I was vaguely hoping to bump into, but it never seemed to happen. I just didn't have what it took, a BBC camera crew. There was a time when I was never driven around Paris except in a bus. Now I had the opportunity to be shown over it by an expert. It's quite quick, this car.
It is going to be quicker. Till 100 miles.
You were a pretty wild girl, weren't you?
No.
No?
Very nice girl.
No, but wild.
Wild. Not
little,
so much. Not so much wild. I was not much, working girl. I was always going to dance in the afternoon. There was jazz club and I was going to dance inside instead to go to my school. But that's all.
When did you find time to write your novel?
Just during the school. There was time where there was no jazz, no dancing in the morning.
So you wrote Bonjour Tristesse when you should have been studying for exams?
Yes, exactly. In the little cafe near La Sorbonne.
Françoise Sagan has had 1,000 addresses in Paris, and her driving exploits are legendary. She emerged alive from an early car crash that broke almost every bone in her body. 35 years of unbroken success later, she is in good shape. A French writer is regarded as a national treasure. A female French writer will be forgiven anything. You had a few car crashes in your earlier days.
Yes, long time ago. Very long time ago.
What was the cause?
I was rolling slowly, but there was some sand. On the road, on the wheel, the pneu, begins to and us, and it was a English car, Aston Martin, beautiful one, but a little heavy for a woman. So.
How many bones did you break in your car crash?
How many? 11 burns, and the two.
11 ribs and 2 wrists.
Good, and the head open. And they thought I was dead. They closed my eye. They took off my chain. And they give me the last...
Last rites?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So now I can... when I went, I got...
Straight to heaven, huh?
Straight to heaven.
I thought we might be going there again. You really like speed, don't you?
Yes, I like.
What does it do for you?
Oh, no, it's funny. Moving blood.
Yeah. What do you feel?
I feel very calm.
Perhaps it calms you because you think so quickly, you have so much energy.
Life is so slow.
She knows everything about cars except how to make them go slowly. This current car was on loan from the manufacturers, who presumably didn't mind what condition they got it back in, as long as Madame Sagan had driven it conspicuously. This, she did. In fact, we hit a guy.
Qu'est-ce qui s'est passé?
Okay.
What happened? Il a raison. Merde, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? I didn't see him.
No, no.
What did he do? He put... I didn't touch him.
We only hit his briefcase, but the impact left him spinning in the street like a weather vane.
Did he give something?
Maybe he hit us.
Oh, well, okay. I was afraid to avert him. No.
I left her invigorated, excited, with an appetite for life. I, on the other hand, hadn't seen much of Paris except a blur. But I was still alive, and Paris was still there, with all its unchanging ability to change a lot without changing very much. Encouraged by high finance, architects do their best to screw up the skyline, but the general effect is hard to damage. Though the Gestapo was at its most horrible in Paris, the Luftwaffe never came there except on leave. So whole vast swathes of the city are just as they were, a living past made to look even more desirable by the rapacious present. If Paris ever ceases to be an artistic city, it won't be because of too much commerce. It'll be because of too much art. The French Impressionists doomed Montmartre to be the mecca of any painter in the world who wants to be a French Impressionist for a little while, before he goes home to Memphis or Mecca. Renoir and the rest of the boys always made a point of leaving the standard idea of art strictly alone. They wanted to get back to life, and eventually that meant getting away from other artists. Paris was left far behind. Gauguin went all the way to Tahiti. Montmartre filled up with those who wanted to be the people they had heard of. Now the trainee Toulouse-Lautrecs are packed tight, easel to easel, painting each other's canvases by mistake. As a one-time would-be French writer, I sympathized. It was harder to feel tolerant of Pigalle, the red light district, which in a previous era had always been quintessentially Parisian, even at its most grotty. The hookers wore berets, and their poodles smoked Gauloises. Now they are gone, replaced by museums of the moving image, in whose brazen doorways the unblushing chuckers in show a combination of civility and surliness that leaves a bad taste in the ear.
Cabaret. You see,
I better think. I'll think, okay?
Okay. No,
maybe I'll come back.
Okay, this problem.
Next problem?
Okay, this problem, you look.
Okay. I'll come back. I'll think. When the hookers shifted their pitch elsewhere, the area was left free to publicize sex without ever actually delivering the product. Pigalle has turned into what Soho used to be before the strip clubs moved out. In fact, Pigalle is where Soho has moved to, and the customers along with it. At night, the busloads of British tourists almost outnumber the Japanese. They all come here for what they could get at home, except here it costs more. At the Moulin Rouge, most of the most beautiful girl dancers come from England. The French female figure is the wrong shape to fulfill Japanese fantasies of what a Paris dancing girl should look like. Paris makes sure that everyone gets the Paris he came for. The determination of Paris to live up to its billing is the real reason why the taxi drivers are so rude. It's because they're expected to be. The pressure to perform makes them even ruder than they would be anyway. Suffering from chronic, terminal impatience, they can be driven crazy by almost anything, including perfectly reasonable attempts to communicate with them in their own language.
Monsieur, monsieur, bon, si vous voulez continuer en avant, je vous dirige plus tard, ok?
C'est trop la voiture. Trop la voiture. Pour la capitale. Tant qu'ils ne cherchent pas une solution, on doit de l'argent parce qu'on travaille pas.
The taxi drivers have been put into this pitiable condition of nervous tension by their understandable preoccupation with the Paris traffic.
On est complètement crevé, hein. Fatigué. Et non seulement aussi, la mécanique, ça souffre beaucoup. Ça roule pas.
In French, the word for traffic is circulation, exactly the wrong word for the traffic of Paris, which does not circulate. Taxi drivers earn less when the taxi doesn't move. They find it hard to forget this fact. They tell you all about it, repeating the same message many times. It's good for your French if you don't mind spending the rest of your life steering the conversation around to the subject of traffic and its related problems. We were meant to be on our way to the right bank, where I wanted to check out a new development which didn't sound like the Paris I used to know. Apparently a new dress code has emerged by which well-bred French people recognize each other when they finally meet after being stuck in the circulation. A little square in the 16th arrondissement is where these refined creatures congregate towards dusk to make sure that no upstart has sneaked in wearing the wrong sweater or is sweating in the wrong sneaker. At last we got there, and I met Marie-Laure Montou, who has a well-chiseled nose for the subtle details of how the French gentry dress, eat, behave, and educate their young. Marie-Laure can tell the genuine gentlefolk from the arrivistes at 1,000 meters in a thick fog.
BCBG, what is it? What does that stand for? Bon chic,
Bon chic, bon genre, BCBG.
Bon chic, bon genre, what does that mean?
Just style of life, a style to be dressed, a style to be in the life. And you can see the BCBG very far, and I can tell you this one is BCBG or this one is not. You have two girls coming there, BCBG.
Where?
In green, yeah. They are BCBG. They have a nice blouse, and the green, dark green like this is BCBG, and their hair put like this.
What if they were? They look like Norwegian paratroopers. What's in the backpack?
Yeah, but they're teenagers. They're coming from school and they have their books.
Yeah,
they're schoolgirls. Yeah, they're coming from... in France, we don't have uniforms.
I would have thought the girl on the right was a model or something.
No. But
What a profile.
This one on the left is perfectly BCBG. She's got the right color for the blouse. And the boys near the car.
Okay.
You see with the navy blue blazer is BCBG.
Yeah? The pink shirt, even?
Yeah, but it's not pink. It's probably striped, red and white.
That's the sort of car he'd drive?
Yes, Volkswagen it's a good car for young people.
Yeah.
When they're 15, no, but when they're between 25 or 30 years old, it's quite a good car.
I thought he looked a bit light on his feet, actually, but perhaps I was jealous.
Okay, what about her? She surely must be BCBG.
She wants to look like a BCBG, but she's not BCBG. You don't wear a black suit like this during daytime with a sort of gold brooch. It's too flashy for the day. It would be good for the night, but not for the evening, but not for the daytime.
So much for her. The genuine article was over at the ice cream stand.
They're perfectly BCBG with English shoes, star-tri, an Oshkosh trousers for the little boy, navy blue blazer for the little girl with a knot in the hair. That's very BCBG. They are very neat and very nice looking.
You can tell all that from the back?
Yeah.
English things are very popular
Yes,
with BBC.
English is very, very popular for BCBG because the men very often are completely dressed by English things.
Isn't the whole system a bit aristocratic? It's all a bit as if the French Revolution had never happened, isn't it?
Well, I think the revolution tried to put everybody together, but in fact you still have in France the aristocracy.
The spectre of a mob of snobs in Barbers and Burberrys all set to welcome back the Bourbons was dispelled by the consideration that what really counts in Paris has never been the class system so much as class itself, which anyone can have, especially if they have talent. Failing that, they can have style, and the place to go to prove they've got that is the opera. The opera is a social event in Paris and stops for nothing. While the beaches were being bombed at Dunkirk, the opera was full every night, and Karajan had a big success there with the front stalls full of German generals. Stylish Parisians behave as if modern art was created specifically for them. There's something to it. The Paris Opera is where Diaghilev had his first big season in 1908. The fine ladies flipped. Ever since, Paris has been proud to welcome the avant-garde artist. Nothing is too avant for Paris. The opera I was booked in to see was called Celestine. Enticingly billed as a tragicomedy in 11 tableaux, it was brand new, and the publicity handout was eager to reassure us that its credentials as a potentially incomprehensible work of modern art were impeccable. In particular, we could take comfort from the prior information that melody would be strictly avoided. Melody wasn't avoided. It was waylaid, leapt upon, and strangled. The cast was nothing like as well-dressed as the audience. I have nothing against Brecht in his place, which is East Germany, but this was Paris. There was a stage full of black leather protesting about capitalists, and an auditorium full of capitalists failing to protest about a stage full of black leather. It looked like a contradiction in terms, which would have mattered less if it hadn't sounded like a huge turkey slowly laying an egg. The soprano tried to end it all by hanging herself. I sympathized when the noose didn't work. Why should it? Nothing else had. My watch said an hour had passed, but surely the curtain had gone up a lot longer ago than that. The two ladies tied to a bedstead were presumably begging to be released. I knew exactly how they felt. They felt that in a life from which music is almost our only escape, music itself should not be something we want to escape from. I, luckily, was free to leave. A nice opera house, though. There's a new one going up at the Bastille, and maybe modern operas could be put on there, leaving this place for the old stuff that nobody except the public likes. What you can be sure of is that new music will be encouraged. Paris is where the advance guard is a whole army. It is de rigueur to be au fait. Anyone with any pretensions at all to an education is bang up to date about the arts. Parisians know all about them, and if possible, they are also in them. It is practically compulsory to be in the movies. I passed a crew making a commercial. They had pulled a crowd who were all learnedly discussing angles, editing, and the relationship of Jean-Luc Godard to clinical psychiatry. Whether the commercial was for portable bicycles or 1940s clothes was hard to figure out straight away, so everybody hung around for a long time. Paris is a ready-made studio for the French film industry, which continues to demonstrate a heartening capacity to discover a new sex bomb actress every year and then find out the year after that she can actually act. Meeting one of these creatures was definitely on my list of research projects. The latest marvel is called Béatrice Dalle, and I saw her face all over Paris. Her mouth has been described as an angry metro entrance, but I thought she was an angel when I met her on the Champs-Élysées, where she was discovered. A man had run up to her and said, "Do you want to be in the movies?" Stardom rapidly ensued, and since then she has been a bit suspicious of any other man who runs up to her and says the same thing. But here again, my BBC camera crew came in handy. Though she is reputed to have a quick temper, she couldn't have been sweeter. She even pretended to understand my French, which I learned from watching a videotape of Edward Heath.
Était-il comme vous avez rêvé?
Paris?
Paris?
Bah oui, au début, oui. Au début, c'était bien, je venais d'une ville de province. Mais après, maintenant, je trouve ça trop petit. Et maintenant, je veux habiter à New York, j'en ai marre d'habiter à Paris. Sur le coup, c'était pas mal, ouais. Quand on vient de province, évidemment, c'est pas mal. Mais pareil, ça fait 6 ans que j'habite là, je connais tout, je connais tous les endroits, je connais tous les gens. Du coup, ça m'amuse plus. C'est pour les touristes maintenant, Paris, c'est plus pour moi. Pour vous.
Pas moi. Comment précisément étiez-vous devenue actrice?
J'ai fait une couverture de magazine par hasard. Et le casting directeur du film l'a vu, m'a présenté à Benex.
Le casting director?
Oui.
Ah,
Oui,
j'ai compris finalement. Le casting director
a vu cette couverture et m'a présenté à Benex. Et c'est bien basé avec Benex et j'ai fait le film. C'est tout. Je savais qu'il allait m'arriver quelque chose de très très bien, parce que j'ai de la chance. J'ai des grandes dents, et les grandes dents, ça veut dire qu'on a de la chance.
Si, vous avez grandes dents.
Ah ouais, ça veut dire qu'on a beaucoup de chance. Le grand front aussi.
Faire lâcher certains.
Having come so close at long last to the self-renewing vitality of Paris, I reflected that if I had met Beatrice 25 years ago, she would have been less than 1 year old. So I was in no mood for frivolity when I hailed my next cab. I resolved to be tough with the driver this time. But he had a secret weapon.
Si vous voulez aller voir, oui, monsieur, je vous dirige.
This taxi driver didn't have to talk at all in order to express his boiling anger. His spokesdog did it for him. After a couple of blocks of keeping my nose out of the dog's mouth by moving my head from side to side, I had had enough and took to the metro, which costs less and where there are no dogs. In sharp contrast to the London Underground, which makes you want to climb into a bin liner before you get on it, the Paris metro is very clean, highlighting the social problems which go down there to get a roof over their heads. The Arab traders are a hint that a lot more Arabs are up there in the daylight, not doing very well. Upstairs under the chestnut trees, you could forget that France has an unemployment problem. But down here, it's on the surface. The homeless, however, have to pretend that they're only visiting. If they show signs of wanting to take up residence, les flics materialize in strength. Since even people who own cars use the metro when they actually want to get to the other side of town on the same day, the whole population moves around under Paris at some time or another. But nobody is allowed to stay down there, except the dead. Those among the departed who have sufficient cachet are well looked after in the cemetery of Père Lachaise. Rights of residence are established as much by achievement as by connections. This is still the best reason for handing Paris the palm as the greatest of all international cities. It has always been a natural home for gifted people fleeing from repression, incomprehension, or just bad cooking. Paris is a resting place, and its own resting place is here, a still center where it's still okay to wear black in the daytime. As As much at home in Paris as he was in London, Oscar Wilde was just as witty in French as he was in English. His tomb by Epstein has been devotedly disfigured by both unsleeping enemies and questionable admirers. But for the French, his ambiguous personal reputation has always been far outweighed by his literary fame. Paris understood Wilde's essential gift, which was to dramatize himself. In England, if a man turns himself into a drama, those who envy him will try to write the last act. At least Wilde was able to take his curtain calls in a more tolerant city. And for the French artist, Paris can never do too much by way of homage, even in death. Edith Piaf's last concerts while she was alive consisted almost entirely of the great chanteuse standing weeping in a spotlight while being bombarded with flowers. And now her grave looks as if the bouquets are still being thrown.
Êtes-vous un officiel de le cimetière?
Non, 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 non. Je ne suis pas du cimetière du tout. Non, non, non. Je suis adhérent de l'association des amis d'Edith Piaf.
Un fan.
Fan, oui.
So she's still making that last appearance. A less spectacular slab covers the mortal remains of a true literary hero. Brave enough to wait half a lifetime before writing a book that takes almost that long to read, Marcel Proust was very unhealthy, homosexual, and partly Jewish, a combination which made him an outsider. He knew Parisian society in every detail and at all levels, but still he stood outside looking in. Either that's the best way to see Paris, or else believing it's the best way is the best way to console yourself if you don't belong here either. An hour in Père Lachaise is never wasted, because you'll go away resolved to get something done, to earn your place, even if it isn't here. In Paris, there are more aspiring immortals per square meter than anywhere else in the world, and they all have their hangouts. But if you are young and ambitious and desperately want to be noticed in the world of the media, the Café Coste is currently the place to sit casually as if you couldn't care less. Created at vast expense by the same architect who designed President Mitterrand's office, the Café Coste is an Art Deco rebuild with a washroom which has been called a masterpiece of design by those who have never had to use it. Were those the wash basins or the urinals? The consequences of a mistake were unthinkable. And was that a urinal or a shower stall? The consequences of a mistake could be even worse. I gave up, but it still cost me a franc to get out. One customer of the Café Coste who doesn't need to be noticed anymore is Inès de la Fressange, the girl whose face and figure say Chanel. Actually, she can say a lot more than that, and in several other languages besides her own.
The French have a reputation for being incredibly stylish. Is it true?
No, no. I think these are prejudices. I think fashion is done in France, in Paris especially. And there's a lot of designers from other countries who are coming there, and it's very important for them to show from Paris, you know. But in France, you know, I don't think that people care so much about fashion, and they're not better than any other places. But maybe they're more sober. Sober?
Sober.
And they don't like glittering things, shiny things like maybe in the United States, or and they don't like so much fashion. And then there's less fashion victims than maybe in Germany.
What's a fashion victim?
A fashion victim for me is somebody that would wear things that doesn't fit him just because he thinks that it's fashion, or just because he thinks that it's fun, or because he wants absolutely to be different only with his outfit, not with his mind.
Yeah.
And usually a fashion victim, you can just feel that he's stupid.
Is there any real difference between good taste and bad taste, or is it just fashion?
You know, I think there's like recipes. Recipes. For me, the only recipe would be if you're dressing up, you're doing a little story, you're making a little novel, or like a movie, you know?
Yeah.
And everything has to be logical. And then if the story is that for instance, you just dress up like a cowboy, why not? You put a hat, you put a cotton shirt, jeans. But if you put suddenly sneakers with it, or high heels, it's not the story anymore.
So what story are you telling today?
My story today was a fisherman. You know, I have pants like a fisherman, clothes like this, and this obviously, and done a little bit Chanel. And that's what I thought today. It helps, you know.
I tried to tell Ines that she looked like no fisherman I'd ever seen, but I think she thought I was prejudiced. All the easy-seeming glass of Paris piled vertically into one person. Ines, in her own lovely eyes, is just a girl with a good job. She merely happens to look ravishing while she's working at it. The House of Chanel keeps her working hard, however, so my proposal that she give me a complete tour of the architecture of Paris over the next few days had to be cut short. I felt a bit cut short all round. Why do Paris fashion models have to be 8 feet tall? 7 feet would be enough. Anyway, I had a date too, with high society at the race course out at Chantilly, where the stables look as if Louis XIV might drop in before placing a few francs each way on the favorite. The sky was grey, but the upper crust was nothing daunted. Chantilly hadn't previously been my scene, mainly because it's so obviously their scene. Lovingly polished English classic cars underlined the impression that this is their ascot, but they like their funny hats to look merely extravagant rather than outright crazy. The story their costumes told was that the in-crowd remains cool, even when out to lunch. Unlike the English, you don't catch them wearing hats like teacups or bathroom suites. The extravagance is just sufficient to send a signal, which can be roughly translated as, this is our place, and this is our day, so it's all right to do something a little bit stupid, because when you get right down to it, it's all right for some, and let's face it, that's us. Nevertheless, I detected an all-pervading air of melancholy, caused by the absence of the French royal family, which had been unavoidably detained, owing to a previous engagement with the guillotine. Outright despair was successfully staved off, however. As well as dressing up, there were toys and games. One of the supporting events for the horse races was a competition for those mostly English classic cars, which the snazzier French families like to invest in for profit and run around in for fun. Hats being the order of the day for men also, I borrowed one from the House of Lanvin and melted into the ambiance like a chameleon. The Houret Henris and Henriettes had no idea that there was an interloper in their midst.
Alors, la table est là. La table est là. Si vous voulez être gentil, de vous reculer un petit peu pour qu'on puisse voir.
James Coburn, having retained his hat from the Magnificent Seven, had been drafted in as judge of the machinery.
Jean-Pierre, Coca-Cola, Marlboro.
Ah, very good.
Coburn made no attempt to speak French. Perhaps he didn't realize he was in France, but more likely he had simply grasped that he didn't have to bother, because as an American movie star, he belonged to a royal house that still ruled.
You have to move it along down the line.
Fueled by free champers, Coburn proceeded regally to go where he was pointed. Finally, he won a host of patriotic Parisian hearts by relegating all the English cars to second place. He gave the grand prize to a pre-war French delage with a strangely attired occupant who, I was told, was a princess of some kind and had demanded to be interviewed.
Are you a princess?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, real one?
A real one.
An Indian princess.
I look more as a queen of Indian
Where do you come
American.
From? Where do you come from?
Well, I come from Argentina. Half Argentinian and half French. Yes.
And you live here in France?
I live in France. I have been educated in England, of course.
This is your car?
That's my car now, right now, yes. but Josephine Baker have been the owner before.
Josephine Baker used to own this cat? Oh, that's wonderful. What about your friend here? Your
The
princess?
Countess? The Countess.
You're breeding ducks?
Ducks, yes.
You're not a princess?
Not really, but I'm just about to be one. I'm just probably I'll be one next year, but I'm just starting off with the countess.
So you're a countess now and you're a princess next year?
Next year, maybe.
Well, we meet again
depends on
next
you,
year.
what you make out of this.
And you breed ducks, huh?
Exactly, I breed ducks.
Princess Foot in the Mouth and the duck breeder weren't exactly the kind of French girls I had dreamed of meeting when I first landed flat broke in their beautiful city, but they seemed harmless enough. Of course, if you're rich enough, you can seem anything. The poor people of Paris are the Arabs, and to walk among them is to be reminded that the French had an empire which folded on them just like ours. But despite recent scares, racism couldn't get elected in Paris, where ideas have to be up to date. It isn't hard for the Parisians to cherish the past because they live in it. A poor house in Paris might suffer in its plumbing from being 100 years old, but it looks all the better for it. And no matter how badly you live, you've got something good to look at the end of the street. More of a challenge are the new buildings, of which the Pompidou Centre, familiarly known as the Beaubourg, remains the prime example. A giant air conditioning unit dropped from high altitude into the Marais district. The Beaubourg is composed mainly from bits of pipe and transparent tubes stuck together with gaskets and grommets. Deeply loathed by the fastidious, it is loved by the young, who regard it as their personal promenade deck. There are thousands of them in there at all times, like ants in a glass hill. I must say I have gradually warmed to the place since it was built, so that nowadays I merely dislike it. Bits and pieces seem to be falling off the structure all the time, making it a work of art you can interact with, like a packet of crisps. And the view from the roof is wonderful. Maupassant hated the Eiffel Tower so much that he had lunch every day in the restaurant on its first floor, the only place, he said, from which he couldn't see the Eiffel Tower. I feel the same way about the view from the roof of the Beaubourg. You can't see the Beaubourg from up there, and you can see how all the modern attempts to foul up the skyscape of Paris are doomed to fail. All they can do is remind you of just how good the old stuff looks. Even the Beaubourg wouldn't be such a big hit without the open space in front of it, where exponents of street theatre from all over the world find an audience of exponents of street theatre from all over the world. In my day, street theatre was less of an industry. Now they've got agents. They've also got the perfect platform. The young meet each other down there to make their plans for a future which will have no place for anyone who can't remember looking so self-assured himself. It's good to find out, however, that the next generation of Parisians is even more crazy about the arts than the last one. I found it out from the kind of girl student who wouldn't tell me anything 25 years ago except to go away. 25 years ago, however, Nathalie Villeneuve was still 4 years from being born. These places really for young people.
No, it's for everybody. This is why it's an interesting place, because you can go to the museum, you can go to see some pictures, you can go to see some films, you can go to read. You got everything you want, information, everything.
You like living in Paris?
Oh yeah, very much. Well, because this is my town, and I like very much because you can do everything you want, and you got a mixture of modern and I mean you got the past, the present, and the future, and you got modern things like this, and it's very new, and all around it you got old things, and it's the contrast is very interesting. It's the same in Louvre. You got the monument, the Louvre, and you got La Pyramide, which is called La Pyramide. It's the same like this.
You like the pyramid?
Yeah, very much. I think it's a very interesting idea, and I think it's beautiful. Yeah.
Every French head of state there has ever been has done his best to build something big in Paris. If there is no room to build something big, there is always the chance of building something incongruous. The Palace of the Louvre was put up by 17 different sovereigns. Mitterrand has put up a glass pyramid in the courtyard of the Louvre so that everyone who sees it will think of him instead of the 17 sovereigns. The pyramid has already made the Louvre more popular with the young, in the same way that they might be more likely to visit Notre Dame if it had dodgems. Natalie, you're not seriously telling me you like that thing?
Of course I like it.
I think it's great to have the contrast between the old and the new. I think it's very interesting. This is why the progress is it's interesting.
But Natalie, you just can't have something new stuck in the middle of something old just to provide a
course, we can have it here because it's a wonderful equilibre. I don't know how to say
equilibrium, balance.
I think it's a wonderful balance.
It's a good pyramid, but it belongs in Egypt. Pyramids, pyramids belong in Egypt.
No, it doesn't mean anything. Sorry, but it's another reason which is nice to have the pyramid is that before usually people didn't want to come again to see the Louvre, but now there's something interesting. Now we've got the pyramid and it pulls the crowd really.
It pulls the crowd.
Yeah, yeah. And in the same time they want to see again the Louvre and all the paintings. You have to like this sort of thing because it's a progress, like then they were progress.
Progress?
Yeah.
Yeah, but Impressionists, they did paintings. And you could carry the painting, put it on your wall, but you didn't put it in front of...
No, I think this is not a problem. I think it's a problem of idea and
age. You think I'm too old, huh?
No, I don't think you're too old.
Too old and too stupid.
No, it's not a problem. It's not.
At least the pyramid's transparency allows you to see the old building through the new one. But you would be able to see the old one even more clearly if the pyramid wasn't there at all. A desirable alternative, which in my view could easily be achieved by dynamite. Natalie has to live with the thing, however, and she likes it. Time runs out for everyone, but the young can't hear it going under the bridge. Appalled that I had never found out where the young people of Paris go after dark, Natalie agreed to show me the nightlife. With dire memories of a sprained ankle acquired trying to dance to bebop in a cellar behind the Sorbonne, I was ready to groove, but first we had to eat. If she lives in Paris, even a girl with a good job won't have an apartment much bigger than a shoebox, and Natalie is only a student, so sometimes it is necessary to eat cheap. The place to do that is at Madame Codin's, where the hungry young can eat a chicken dinner for 5 francs. Far less than the average British student has to pay for a meal of crisps, Mars bars, and a pint of brown chemical byproduct. I wish I'd known about this place when I had more hair than money. I might never have left.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's wonderful. Depuis combien de temps avez-vous dirigé cette...
38 ans.
38, that's how much? 38?
49. El 15 mars del 49.
According to Madame, the whole place was run on a strict business basis. She's been around for a long time and has perhaps lost touch with reality. I can't believe that she's making a profit. She's doing it all for love, but perhaps that is reality. In Paris, it's traditionally easy to feel that way, especially with a pretty girl on your arm. And of course, the young who spend what little money they have on how they look aren't going to complain about how well they eat on the pittance left over. At long last, I was the boulevardier that I'd always dreamed of being. Paris was at my feet. A taxi appeared before I'd even raised my hand, and, wonder of wonders, it was being conducted by a civilized driver. To start with, he didn't have a mastiff guarding his meter, so I didn't get my nose bitten off when I climbed in. He was polite. He played very good music on the stereo, and even though he looked like Yves Montagn's young son, he did not try to steal the girl. That kid will never make it as a Paris taxi driver. The circulation melted away as if by magic, and we sped towards the throbbing cave, which is currently one of the top late-night hangouts for penniless youth, Studio A. On the way in, Natalie almost ruined my evening by telling me that if, all those years ago, I had known which staircase to go down, I would have found caves just like this one, full of wonderful French girls simply aching to meet a young Australian male with lots of hair. It was a great night out, but it was too late. I felt like a visitor from another planet, which I suppose is what I was, and always had been. No matter how often you come back to Paris, if you go away that first time, you leave behind the life you might have led there, the man you might have been, the essays you might have written at the cafe tables, the manifestos you might have signed, the mastery you might have obtained over the French language and Paris taxi drivers. You might have risen high in French politics, romanced Inès de la Fressange from the top of a ladder, hatched a plan to fill in the Arc de Triomphe with a split-level shopping mall, been run down in the Boulevard Saint-Germain by Françoise Sagan, buried in Père Lachaise, and Nathalie might have been your daughter. I can't imagine a more satisfactory life. Nathalie met the young man she had really come to see, which was only fitting, because my time was up. I had to leave Paris the next morning. As always, I would wonder why, and start counting the days before I could go back, and then lose count, and be lost again in the life that by some strange twist of fate I lived somewhere else. Au revoir, Paris. Bonjour, tristesse.